I'm joined by Dr. Craig Hogan, president of the Afterlife Research and Education Institute and one of the most respected voices in the field of consciousness survival. He's not just a researcher, he's an educator, a speaker, and the author of multiple books. He spent decades compiling and synthesizing data from near-death experiences, verified mediumship, electronic communication with the dead, remote viewing, and quantum physics to show that consciousness continues. Dr. Hogan, thank you so much for being here. It's truly an honor.
It's a delight. I look forward to it today. We have lots of things to talk about, so let's go ahead and get started.
Absolutely. For a long time, topics like consciousness, after death, the soul's journey, these were written off as superstition or pseudoscience.
Mhm.
But the wild thing is it's not new. The ancients were talking about this for thousands of years. It seems like we're just starting to catch up with the science side of it. So I've got to ask, when you tell people what you do, what kind of reactions do you get?
Well, I get reactions from people that range from those who are strong Christians or strong Jewish backgrounds, and they are telling me that there are sacred scriptures, and that has all the answers, and we can't look anywhere else other than sacred scriptures. So then they dismiss it. Or there are people who are hard-nosed scientists, and they tell us that there's nothing going on in the brain or in the mind, and so as a result of that, when the brain dies, the mind dies, and so there's no sense in even talking about consciousness or the afterlife. And then there are people who are actively seeking. They're actually looking. They have a sense that there's something there. They know that when grandma leaves the earth, that she isn't really gone, and they talk to her and they have conversations with her, but they don't really understand what it is that they're talking about. What goes on in the afterlife? Are we assured that people are going to get there? And so that group of people who are actively looking now are the ones that we're most interested in talking to and helping them to understand what we know to be true. We have a wonderful message about the life after this life, and we just have to let people know what it is that we know to be true. So those are the groups that we run into, but we're just anxious to talk to those people who are open-minded and want to learn more.
I love that. How did you get into this work? Take me back to the beginning. No one just falls into this work. So what pulled you toward this path?
No, didn't fall into it. I was drawn into it. I actually had gone through half a century of my life. So I was 52 years old. And I started meeting psychics. It seemed like every person I met was a psychic of some shape or form. And it turns out that all of these people then were able to do something that I didn't understand. They were able to tell things about people's lives, and they didn't understand how they could do that. And so I engaged them and I talked to them and I tried to understand. And so then I began to study the psychic activity and psychic phenomena. And as I did so, I encountered more and more of these things that can't be explained other than the fact that there is something more to reality than this earth, than just what we sense to be true. And so I delved into it more, and I found out that, well, if the mind is outside of the body and we can do psychic things outside of the body, that means that when the body dies, the mind keeps on going. So then I delved into the afterlife and what would happen to the mind after the body had died. And as I did that, I discovered that people are living in the afterlife. They're communicating clearly to us, and they just want us to understand that. They just want us to know that that's true. And so what we're doing now is we're trying to find new ways of helping people to communicate with people living in the afterlife. And we're very successful. We have found wonderful ways that anybody can have afterlife communications with their loved ones now living in the afterlife. And so that's the path that I've gone to. And now I devoted my entire life to it. I am doing research right now. I'm involved with other people who are doing this research, and we're discovering methods of the afterlife communication that are valid and up to 98% successful. And we are finding out more about the life after this life. We have roadmaps of it. We know what life is like there. And so it's exciting because of what we have. Now we're trying to bring that to humanity. People just have to understand it is not a mystery. It's something that we know to be true, just as surely as we know there is a history of the United States or some other phenomenon that we're not directly involved with, but we know it's true. The same is true of the afterlife and afterlife communication. So that's our mission now, is to help people to understand what we know to be true.
Absolutely. I came into psychic phenomenon ESP through the Gateway Project.
Monroe.
And yes, and I was a hopeful skeptic in all of this. And it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't until I tried mediumship and psychic work myself and realize that yes, we can all do it. It's just a matter of to what degree and how well and how much you practice it. But
Mm.
it's something we can all do.
Yeah.
Still, you have the materialist mindset. I got to ask you, where's the evidence? Because most people will say, where's the proof? Where's the evidence? And you've worked with actual evidence. So for those skeptics, what kind of scientific and measurable research is out there?
Yeah, we have libraries of research now, a tremendous amount of research that has demonstrated the fact that we continue to live after the body dies. So the research is out there. Most profound research that we have is in people living on this side of life, still alive here on Earth, and they encounter and have conversations with their loved ones now living in the afterlife. You can't fake that. When you have a conversation with someone living in the afterlife, as though you were sitting across the breakfast table from them and having a casual conversation, that can't be faked. These are people who are having conversations with their loved ones, and these go on for 45 minutes or an hour of going
Yeah.
back and forth. And we have people who came in, especially to a medium named Leslie Flint, who was in the 20th century. And Leslie Flint would sit in a room, and people from the afterlife would come into the room. The technicians working with him and the other side would form a voice box on his shoulder. And the people living in the life after this life would then come in and they would speak through that voice box. They recorded the resulting sessions. We have over 2,000 of them now. But these are people, loved ones on this side of life, who come in every month or every 6 months and would sit down and for 45 minutes or an hour just have a conversation with their loved one who's now living in the afterlife. And their loved one in the afterlife tells them about things they're doing currently. There's one woman who came through whose name was Annie Nanji. Her husband was Dr. Dinshaw Nanji, who was a faculty member on the Birmingham University in the UK. And he's well known. He has many articles that were published, but he came into Leslie Flint's sessions and he would sit down and Annie would come through from the afterlife. She had passed away in 1962. He came to Leslie Flint in 1969. And he would have conversations with him, and she would tell him about what he was doing that day, what he was doing before he came up to be with Flint, about what he's doing in his flat at home. She was with him constantly. She stayed with him. And that's profound evidence. She was able to talk with him about what he was doing in his life, and he was able to hear her say things that no one could have known. Flint couldn't have known. He's the only other person sitting in the room. So that's profound evidence. So the evidence that we have that's the best evidence is these kinds of conversations, such as those who came through Flint, with the actual loved ones on this side of life, speaking to their counterparts on the other side of life, on the next realm of life, and talking freely about what's going on. That's proof that they're alive and well and living in the afterlife. We have thousands of these now, and they're conclusive proof of the fact that we do not die when the body dies.
Absolutely. I've come to that conclusion as well
Mhm.
through my work, yet I want to go back to the materialist mindset that is still so pervasive in society. I'm wondering,
Mhm.
why do you think the scientific community is still so resistant to this? Do you think it's fear or control, or are we just addicted to the material world and can't accept anything we
Yeah,
can't see?
yeah, that's the truth. The materialist scientists are engaged in using the senses, and they can only believe what comes through the senses. And as a result of that, what happened was that the church held on to the notion of what happens after life until the 16th century, when science began to discover that there is much more to life than they had realized. And the scientists then realized that it wasn't necessary to have what the church was giving. The church was giving all these things that were superstitions about gods and about things having to do with people's lives in the afterlife. And they said, that's all nonsense. We're not going to, don't believe that. And so then they went their merry way after that period of time and continued to develop that. And so today we are gripped in materialism. We don't have a state religion in the United States, but there is a state religion. It's called materialism. The schools teach materialism, the universities teach materialism. If you don't believe in materialism, then you can be scoffed at. So materialism now is the religion. And that's happened over the past 400 years. And we're now going beyond that for the first time in humankind's history. We have stopped using religion. We have stopped believing the materialists. And we're beginning to realize now that there is much more to life than we thought was possible before. The 20th century broke that open with quantum mechanics. And quantum mechanics told us that consciousness has a much greater impact upon reality than we realized. And so now today are people who are talking who are called idealists, who believe that the basis of reality is consciousness. It isn't the material realm. And so that voice from science is telling people and telling the scientists that we are much more than simply the bodies and what is in the material realm, that there is more within our minds, there is more in a life after this life. And so science now is not catching up, but many scientists who have studied the data are realizing the fact that this is true, that there's much more to life than we realize. And so they are coming around. The hard-nosed scientists are not going to come around. What Max Planck said at the turn of the 20th century was that their minds are not going to be changed by changing the minds of the old guard, the old boors who are in the discipline now. What's going to happen is they're going to die, and then the young ones are going to come up and they're going to realize that that's true. And this is what's happening today. We have much more open-minded young people who understand what it is that we're saying. So that is where the revolution is going to take place. And that revolution then is going to be the third revolution. If we had one that was from religion into science, then this is going to be the revolution from science into an understanding of the afterlife and afterlife communication.
Excellent.
Mhm.
I'm curious. So, what happens at the moment of death? From your experience, what happens?
When a person's body dies, and the death process takes some time, some people go through the death process and come up almost to the threshold of leaving the body behind, but then they are brought back to life. And that's only happened since about 1969, when people could be recovered if they had had a heart attack or something else that would be a sudden illness that would result in their passing. Then after that period of time, then when people were brought back from the brink of passing, then they would describe near-death experiences. And the near-death experiences are when their minds are released from the body and they come into a state of mind in which they're having experiences of their loved ones who have passed on before them, and they come in and they have the experience of this wonderful radiant divine being who comes and speaks to them, and conversations about coming back to earth. And so then people began to realize that there is more to life than just this life, and that's just at the threshold. But then we started within the 20th century to have more afterlife communication. So we began communicating with the people who had made the transition. They went all the way through, past the near-death experience, into the next life. And then they started communicating to us, and they're very anxious to communicate and tell us what's going on there. We have now 15 methods of afterlife communication that are highly successful. People are using them daily. Anyone can use them. We teach people how to use them. And some of them are done by psychotherapists who can put their people into a state of mind in which they have afterlife communications. And those are the ones that are 98% successful. Others, we teach them through hypnosis, that they can learn self-hypnosis and go into a state of mind in which they can have these communications. So what's happening today is that individuals, ordinary people, are having their own afterlife communications with their loved ones now living in the afterlife. And that then has caused a new revolution. And that revolution now is helping people to understand that there's much more to life than just what we see, that we are much more than the body, and that we continue to live after the body dies. And that is the revolution that's going to be taking over next. And we're in the process of, in the early stages of watching that happen.
It's beautiful.
Mhm.
It really is. And I got into this work early on was through NDEs. I'd listened to
Mhm.
hundreds of them, and then I had read about hundreds of them. And what I found so intriguing was how religion ties into NDEs,
Mhm.
but it also doesn't at the same time. You'll have people that aren't religious that have very religious NDEs, and vice versa. So, can you talk about any of that?
Yeah, the what happens in the near-death experience is that the person encounters this divine being who speaks to them, and it could be in the form of whatever their religious preferences are. So somebody who's a Christian may encounter what they believe to be Jesus. Someone who is of another faith, a Hindu or a Buddhist, then they will encounter a being they would expect to encounter. And the reason for that is that the near-death experience is tailored to the individual. So we get in the near-death experience what will help us to live better lives. So the near-death experience is a near death. It is in the realm of planning of what happens in our lives. The planners then realize that that's true. So we're given what will help us to live a different life. And so then people will see those people, those individuals, those cosmic individuals, whom represent for them a God, and they will have a conversation with them, and then they will tell them to come back. And the reason for that is because they expect that and want that to be true. And so the divine being will come in many forms to them. So we do have experiences in which people will have other entities who are in their religion come through and speak to them. And then they are urged to come back. They often are given a choice. They can either go forward into the next life or they can come back. And then those who come back then have these wonderful experiences. And they describe those religious entities who speak to them. Now, as far as in the life after this life, among the people who do make the transition, who go all the way into the next life, they do talk about encountering people. Many encounter Jesus or Yeshua. Yeshua is the Aramaic name for Jesus. And so then they will encounter Jesus and they will speak to him. And that's very common. We know the fact that Jesus is a real individual. He was not a god. He was an individual who came to life, to earth, to bring us a message, to help us to understand life, to help us to change our lives. And one of the passages that's in the Gospel of Thomas, and it's also in Luke, he said, repent for the freedom of the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And that was a mistranslation. It actually should be have a change of heart and mind, for the kingdom of God is within you, is what he
Yes.
was saying. And so what he was saying was that we can live that life here now. We can have the kingdom of heaven while we're still on earth. So the religious figures then, the only one that I know of who has come through as an individual from people who are living in the life after this life is Jesus. And that doesn't mean that there are not other entities that might come through. But they will come through and they will give these messages to near-death experiences. And then people who make the transition can go to actual lecture halls, vast lecture halls, thousands and thousands of people, and speakers come in, and the speakers might be Martin Luther, who came in, or somebody like Jesus who would come in, and then they would speak to these vast crowds. So we know the fact that Jesus was a real individual. He came to teach us the way, which is what they say that it is, and the way was to consider other people as ourselves and to live in love, peace, and joy with each other. And he was here to teach us that. He was not a God. And so then people do encounter Jesus when they go to the life after this life.
Mhm. What's heaven like?
Oh, we have roadmaps of it now. So we have many conversations with people who have gone on to the next life. And what they tell us about is from the beginning, when they first arrive there, people arrive in different ways. Some people awaken and they'll be in a home, and the home could be a home that they had when they were a child. Another man had awakened in a field, and he saw coming towards him an old horse. It was his old Nellie, who had passed away, and it devastated him when Nellie had passed away. But she came walking down the road, just joyfully coming to him, and so she met him there. He was asleep under a tree. Others have gone to places that are called convalescent areas. And these are places where there are hospital beds all around. And there are people lying in the hospital beds. And they are there to waken on the other side. They've been asleep for perhaps 3 days. When they awaken, then their loved one comes to them and then they walk out of that convalescent area with their loved one. So there are many ways in which people have their first experience on the other side. After they have that, then they go to where they're going to live. People live in modest homes, they don't live in mansions. And as a result of that, then they will have a place that is a wonderful place that they would love to live in. And they have this wonderful experience of this reunion with the people and the pets that they love, and so then they go with them to their house and where they're going to live. Then in the evenings, when they go there, they may decide to go to a concert, or they may go to a football game, or they may go to a baseball game, or they may go sailing. They can go boating. There are motorcycles that they can drive. There are automobiles that they can drive, and all the things that we would expect on Earth are there as well, but much more. They're able to experience things that they have not experienced. They can go back in a period of history and they can experience what happened during that. They don't just go and watch it happen, they experience it. They can't participate, but they experience what was going on at that time of history. So there are just many things that people can do in the life after this life that they can't do here. If they want to go from one place to another, they simply intend to be there. So if they
Mhm.
intend to be someplace else to meet with a group of people, they intend to be there and they're simply there. If they intend to come back and see their loved ones on earth, they intend to be in the home with their loved one and they're suddenly there. And when they're there, then they can't be seen, but they can experience everything. So people do come from the life after this life into our lives, and then they try to inspire us. They try to help us to understand. They try to think with us, to influence our minds. And then in that way, then they can help us. They can help us to grow, help us to understand what's going on with our lives. And so we know that they can come by just intending to be here. They can communicate telepathically. People communicate telepathically in the life after this life. And so we know all of these things are true. It's a wonderful experience when we go to the next life. And we will continue to grow and just enjoy our experiences there and the love of all the people that we live with there.
Mhm. I love what you touched upon, learning and growing. And
Mm,
there's a lot of different takes on what this world is. Dolores Cannon called it Earth School.
mm,
Edgar Casey, Michael Newton, even Plato had their idea of we're here to grow, evolve, and remember who we are.
mm.
Others paint a darker picture. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Gnostics, but they saw
Yeah,
Earth as a kind of prison, an
right.
artificial system, and trapping the soul. More recently, I think there's even thoughts about possibly an alien race taking you at the light. So people come up with a lot of stuff, but I'm curious on what you've studied. What is this place and why would we choose to come here?
Yeah, and the Gnostics believe that this earth was created by a demiurge,
Hmm.
and it was created, and now it was Sophia uh, came, who was one of the archons, came to Earth, and she was going to try to give humanity knowledge. And so then she gave humanity knowledge, and that created great difficulties for humanity because then humanity was trapped in this world, which is called a demiurge. Uh, the demiurge then created this world, and this world then is an illusion. And so Sophia gave us that. And so now Sophia is attempting to help us to get out of that, to realize that this is just this is a figment of our imaginations. You know, we're just participating in this, but it is not the ultimate reality. And that we can then have the gnosis or the knowledge that will help us to break out of this, will help us to realize who we are in eternity. And as a result of that, then we can live lives full of love, peace, and joy. But we had to break out. So that's what the Gnostics taught. Unfortunately, their teachings were overwhelmed by the monumental Christian church, which took over. And so then they taught their brand of what they believed that Yeshua was teaching. And so as a result of that, then we're kind of stuck with that. The Christian church today is not as strong as it was, and it is going away, and eventually it will go away. But the Gnostics and the other that you had mentioned, the concept by Houghton Susskind and others who were talk about a a hologram, that we lived in a hologram, and that there is a surface And on the surface, all knowledge and all events are happening, and then we participate in them in this 3D world that we live in. And of course, none of that has any truth to it, and there is no proof that it's true. But what we do know is the fact that we have real experiences. There is nothing but mind and experiences. We have our minds. Our minds continue to live after the body dies. And within this realm, within the earth realm, then we have experiences here. And they're just experiences in the mind. There is no physical world that's outside of us. There's nothing but consciousness. And that's called a idealistic perspective, or Bernardo Kostreps calls it analytical idealism. And that's the belief that underneath all of this is consciousness. It's the mind of God. And that we are having experiences in consciousness, but there's no physical world outside of us. And so that pretty much is, I think, the direction that things are going to go. I believe that we are going to ultimately land on an idealistic perspective in which there is only mind and experiences, and that is what we're going to discover is the ultimate reality of this life.
Yes. Do you find that the simulation theory kind of tries to match these other ideologies, but it takes out the spiritual side of it? Because
Yeah,
that's my take on it.
yeah, right. The simulation theory is still materialist.
Right.
So what the simulation theory is saying, well, this world is a materialist world. It's being created, and Hooft and Susskind suggested it was from the future, like there was someone in the future who was having this simulation, who's created this simulation, and then we are then enacting it, or it's some snotty-nosed adolescent kid up in some celestial realm who's playing on his video game, and we are the video game. But we know that that's not true. There is no basis for real believing that it's true, and
Yeah.
there are all kinds of reasons for believing that it's not true. For instance, the simulation hypothesis suggests that this world is pixelated, that there are units, and the Planck length is the smallest in the physical realm of the units, and in time it's the now period of time. But what we find is that when we get down to those levels, then there is no pixelation. There is no now as a unit. There is no single Planck length. It goes further than that. It's continuous rather than being discrete. And so then the simulation hypothesis really has no basis in which to say that it's true, and it's all speculation. And indications are that what the simulation hypothesis suggests must be true simply isn't true. So that really doesn't hold any water. The only real explanation for the realm that we live in, for this earth realm, is that this earth realm is based on consciousness. We are having experiences in consciousness, and we will have them together as long as we stay in this realm. When we go to the next realm, which we call the afterlife, then that we will simply adjust our focus. In other words, we'll change our consciousness to a focus on that next realm. And when we change our focus to the next realm, we have all the experiences there. So we have then all the senses, the five senses plus bodily sensations. And so we'll have all of those in the next realm in the same way that we're having them in this realm, but they're just experiences. And so what they tell us in the other side is there are thousands of realms like this. I mean, ours is the Earth realm is just one. In fact, they use the word millions of realms like this. And so then we are not privileged in having the only planets on which there is life, and there is life on other planets, for instance. And so we know that this is true. And all that it takes is a change of focus, so we can focus on the next life. And we can do that now. You mentioned the Monroe Institute. The Monroe Institute helps people enter a state of mind in using binaural beats in which they can enter other consciousnesses. That all they're doing is changing focus. It's just a matter of mind. So then they can change focus and they can go into the afterlife. They can have an experience in which they go in and rescue. Bruce Moen, who had who learned the bilateral, keep on to say bilateral, it's binaural beats, had learned the procedure and learned how to go into the life after this life, would go in and rescue people who were stuck, and he would help them to get out of it. But all he's doing is changing his focus. He's changing his focus from this life into the next life, and there he can do things. He can actually act there. So all of it's just a matter of focus. Right now we're focused on
Mhm.
Earth. Next life will be focused on Summerland, what the Theosophists called Summerland. And then we will continue to change focus. That's all it is, to go from one realm to another.
Mhm. Yeah, so the demiurge in this flawed realm, and then you have Maya, the veil of
Mm.
illusion,
Hmm.
the great dream, the matrix. But there's these glitches in the matrix. I'm
Hmm.
talking about synchronicities, deja vus. I've had my own share of them, and it's sometimes they come in waves where it's just they're nonstop. It's insane. It's undeniable. I've also had many prophetic dreams where years down the line something comes to fruition. So I know that time is an illusion. Um, I don't know how you feel about all this, if you had any of your own experiences, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, and time is an illusion, and people have difficulty understanding what that means. There is a time. There is a time of sorts. There is a past, a present, and a future. We only know about life. We only know about the future, for instance, because there is a past. In other words, we're able to bring up memories from the past. If there were no memories from the past, then there would be no now. There would be no future. We would just be jellyfish. But we do have a memory of the past. In the next life, we continue that. We continue to have a past, a present, and a future, just exactly the same way that we do here. But eventually, as people grow in the next life, they go on to other stages, more celestial stages. The higher the stage they go to, the less there is a need for the past, present, and future. Then the past, present, and future all meld into one. And so then they then will not have those experiences. But now on Earth, we have past, present, and future. In the next realm, we will continue that because we are Earth people. But they don't have suns, they don't have seasons, and they don't have night in which it gets dark. It does get dimmer at times, but not night. So there is no time is very different there. It's a very different form of time, but there's still a past, present, and future. So we still do have it. So eventually, then that all goes away. The Herman Minkowski, who was Einstein's professor, took a look at Einstein's work, and he said, "You know what you're describing here? You're describing a space time. It's space and time together. So it isn't space and time; it's space time. So then time then becomes the fourth dimension." And what he was saying was that that means that everything that ever was and ever will be, all the thoughts, all the feelings, all the events that happen in people's lives, everything that ever was is in a block called space time. And in the same way that you can look at a block like a loaf of bread, you can go someplace in the block and you can pull something out of it. You can get a memory of George Washington crossing the Delaware. You can get the sight of him. You can see what he was thinking. And all these things are in the space time block. The problem is you can't cue them up. So you can't bring them to mind because you don't have the cues. Like I can cue up the image of my mother just by thinking of her, just by intending to have her image come to me. That's in the space-time block, but it's something I can get to, I can access because of the fact that I've got the cue. The cue is my mother. But if I don't have the cue for George Washington crossing the Delaware, I can't bring that up. But it is out there in the space-time block. It is accessible. We could conceivably bring it up. And that's what happens when people have experiences like they may have experiences like remote viewing, in which they can go out and they can get things from any time and from any physical location. All they're doing is changing focus. They're going over to that, whatever that is or whatever that was. And when they do that, then they access that out of the space time block and they bring it in. So conceivably, we could access anything from any time in the future, in the past, out of the space time block. If we just got the cue, all we have to do is find out how we can cue it up. And people like Monroe in the Monroe Institute, they use the binaural beats, and that helps people to get into a state of mind in which they can access many, many more parts of the loaf than the ordinary person can.
Mhm. Yeah, a lot of people talk about signs and downloads.
Hmm.
I mean, these are kind of, I think when you're tuned in and you're in that state, you're more open to receive this guidance
Hmm.
from spirit or whatever. Um, can you speak more about that at all?
Yeah, and that's just a matter of tuning in. So, in other words, then we can tune in to the guidance from our guides. We have guides who are working with us. We have our soul. A soul is a separate entity that is part of the higher self and is working with us. The soul knows everything. The soul knows about the planning that went on before we came here, about what will happen. And so the soul then works with us individually, helps us, inspires us, gives us ideas, gives us conclusions. If we ask questions, it will give us answers. And then there are other people who are helpers and people who are just interested in our lives. And they come to Earth, they come to us, and they inspire us. They try to help us along. When Marie Curie went into the life after this life, and she met the scientists who had been inspiring her during her life here. She came through in a Leslie Flynn seance. And she describes then in her communication back from the afterlife about how she met all these people who had been inspiring her. And they said, "Yeah, you remember this when you found out this about radium? Well, I was helping you to do that." And so, as a result of that, she realized that as a scientist, she was being given inspiration by those people living in the life after this life. And that's what science does. The science on that side of life is making discoveries. They convey them to the science on this side of life through the scientists. And that's how scientists learn things. Very often, scientists will come up with the same conclusion at the same time in disparate areas. They don't have any communication with each other. But they come up with the same conclusions at the same time. And they were inspired. Sometimes people will say, "It came to me while I was in my sleep. I don't understand what happened. I just had the answer to this problem," and it was because they were inspired. It was given to them. So we're continually being given inspiration and love and concern for us, and all of the wonderful feelings that people have for us. All we have to do is be open to them, and if we're open to them, then we can receive them. So we teach people how to do that. We teach people how to have afterlife communications on our website at afterlifeinstitute.org. And it's free, it's online, anybody can go through the training. And what we do is we help people to go into a state of mind using self-hypnosis in which they can communicate with their loved ones. It's all a state of mind. There is nothing but mind and experiences. And if we change our state of mind, we can go other places. We can have other experiences in other realms. We can have experiences that are in the afterlife or in some other place. And so it's just a matter of mind and experiences. We had a physical mediumship circle here in which we had people, we would sit around in a circle and we would sing songs and raise our vibration, and people from the afterlife would come through. We actually had Arcturians come through. So the Arcturians and at one point Andromedans come through. And so the Arcturians would come through and they would communicate with us during these sessions that we would have. So what they were doing was they were changing their focus from their location to us to be able to communicate. And then we, in our focus, were able to receive their communication. It's all a matter of mind and focus. And so we can have communication with people in the afterlife, people in other realms, people in the past, people in the future. It's just a matter of focus. But the problem is we have to be able to cue it up. So queuing it up is what creates the problem. And you can train yourself to be able to queue up many more dimensions, many more aspects of life and of the afterlife and of other lives. And you just have to learn how to do it.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting stuff. The yogis spent hours and hours meditating on mountains to reach nirvana, and
Hmm.
not that the Hemi sync tapes will get you there in an hour, but just the rapid progress of this technology. I can't wait to see what happens in the next few years with this stuff. Because I've seen some cool brainwave state devices, especially for like lucid dreaming and stuff that are coming out.
Hmm.
That's another thing I'm really interested in. So,
Yeah.
but anyways, yeah, the
Yeah.
first law of the universe is the universe is mental from the Kabbalion.
Yeah.
And I think if you just read over that, you don't really make sense of it. But if the whole universe is mental, it means anything in this universe is connected, in
Yeah.
some way. So an Arcturian or an Andromedan
Hmm.
It's all there and it's accessible.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, and we can communicate. It's a matter of changing focus.
Mhm.
It is something that we can do, and they will come through to us. We also had a mental medium in our circle who would go into places. She was guided into places, and so she would be able to go to them within our sessions that we had. But usually they will come to us. Our loved ones come to us all the time. They're continually trying to help us. They're open to us, and they wanted to see us live happy, fulfilled lives. That's the greatest desire that they have. And so all we have to
Mhm.
do is learn how to listen to them, learn how to be open to them. And if we can be open to them, it can be life changing for us. People who have near death experiences, one of the phenomena of near death experiences is that people then become more psychic. Are able to open their minds. And it's just, being psychic just means you open your mind to more. You get more cues from things. And so then people who go through near death experiences very often become more psychic or psychic for the first time. And they're just changing their focus. They're just getting more of it. Any one of us is capable of getting these messages from our loved ones. We just have to attune ourselves to it, and we can hear them. People have experiences, they're mental experiences, but they're like physical, where they touch people and they kiss them and then they hug them and they go on tours of the afterlife. And it's a wonderful experience, and it's all open to us. People just don't realize they can do it.
Mhm. I'd like to go back to the near-death experience,
Mhm.
particularly the life review and how it ties into karma, as well as heaven and hell, as well as reincarnation, and anything you could kind of put into a uh nice thing for people to understand there,
Yeah,
because I feel like the biggest thing is reincarnation. There's
yeah,
misconceptions there,
yeah.
and heaven and hell, obviously.
Yeah, yeah. So you may have to give those to me one at a time. Let's start with
Sure.
reincarnation.
Yeah.
Reincarnation is misunderstood. These are the messages we're getting from the people communicating to us from the afterlife. And what they're telling us is that reincarnation has been misunderstood. We have the evidence of people being able to recall another life. And so a little boy is able to recall that he was a fighter pilot in World War II, and a woman is able to recall that she was a peasant woman in France in the 17th century. And these memories come through to us. One of the famous is a man named Robert Snow. Captain Robert Snow is a captain in the Indianapolis Police Department. And he had gone to a medium and had learned about, I'm sorry, I'm going to reverse that. He had gone into a past life regressionist, and when he went into a past life regression, he had memories of a painter, and he had these memories of the painter and what he painted. And there were 27 facts that he had gotten about this painter's life, and he had the feeling, and of course, those who talk about reincarnation now have this tendency to link it as though this person, Captain Robert Snow, was that painter in a past life. And that's going too far. That's not what the data indicate. But what this person, Robert Snow, was able to do was to recall things about this painter's life. And he couldn't imagine. He was so vivid. He saw an actual painting of a hunchback woman in one of the paintings. And it was so vivid that he decided, he set about, he was going to try to figure out whether this was really real. And so he did the research. He got into the books. He looked at paintings that painters had painted. He couldn't find anything. But it wasn't until several years later when he was on a tour of New Orleans. He was just there as a visit. And he walked into a shop that had old paintings. And there was the painting of the hunchback woman, just exactly the way that he had seen it. And he was amazed. He found out that the painter was named Carol Beckwith. Carol Beckwith had lived in the 19th century. And so then he went into her Carol Beckwith. Carol is a male, into Carol Beckwith's life, and he found out that every one of those 27 details he had learned about Carol Beckwith was in fact true. And so then he was getting Carol Beckwith's life. Now,
people's assumption is that that means that he was Carol Beckwith in some previous life. But we know that that's not true from the communication from people living in the afterlife. They tell us that Carol Beckwith is someone he was intertwined with. His consciousness was intertwined with him, possibly because during the planning period of Dr. Captain Snow's life, they took a framework from Carol Beckwith's life, or they took some parts of Carol Beckwith's life. Then he was intertwined with Carol Beckwith. And that's the reason he was getting these memories of Carol Beckwith's life. And so then we know that that's true from what they're telling us. We stay the individuals we are throughout eternity. We do not dissolve into the amorphous void of the divinity or whatever it is that they believe is out there. We maintain our individuality, we grow and continue to grow, but we are always the same person. And then individuals come into the earth plane who have their lives intertwined with a person who's already been here. And that's where past life regressions come from. And another reason that we know that that's true is because we have people coming through who have been in the afterlife for thousands of years. They come through. Confucius has come through from the afterlife. Roman soldiers have come through from the first century CE. So we know that people are still alive in the afterlife. They retain their individuality. And so what we know to be true is that we are intertwined with other people. And so that's where the past life regressions come from.
From what I've come across, it's usually about 100 years that people tend to wait to reincarnate. I don't know if you have any numbers on that, but
Yeah.
that would make sense to wait for your loved ones to pass and come back to spirit before you reincarnate together. But
Yeah, people don't reincarnate. Uh, what they do is they will be intertwined with an individual who had a life previously, and that's where the past life regressions come from. So
gotcha.
as far as the 100 years is concerned, as I said, we got people who we had one man who in Anthony Borgia's wonderful book that I recommend everybody read, Life in the World Unseen. There is actually a trilogy of them, and he goes into a Monsignor named Monsignor Robert Hugh Benson lived on Earth, and when he passed and he went into the next life, he realized that there is an afterlife, that it's a wonderful world there, and he realized that he had been telling people as a Monsignor that it was all nonsense, and he felt guilty about it, and so he resolved to come through, and he came through from the afterlife to Anthony Borgia, the medium, and he spoke through him, and they then wrote 3 books as a result of these conversations. And one of the things that Anthony Borgia found was Robert Hugh Benson described a man who had been in the afterlife for 1,000 years, and he still lived there, and other people who had been there for hundreds of years. So people don't come back to Earth. They don't leave the next life and come back onto Earth. They are intertwined with people who are incarnated, but they will not come back to Earth.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then what about life reviews? You got any
There
good
are
stories?
actually, yeah, there are actually 3 forms of life reviews. One of the life reviews that happens during a near-death experience, that people may have a life review. And because of the fact that there is no time and time really is not what we have on our clocks, it's not seconds and minutes and hours, that there is no time as such. So people have a life review in which they have incidents come up in their life and they relive them. Yeah, and this can happen in just a few short minutes, but it seems like as they're reliving them, that just going through hours or even days. And so what they do when they have this near-death experience life review is they're having a life review to help them live the rest of their life. I mean, it's acknowledged, it's known that they are going to survive and that they're going to live the rest of their life. And they need to learn things that's going to help them to change, to become the person they could become in their life. And so their life review is suited to helping them to change who they are for the rest of their life. The second life review is one that happens pretty soon after a person transitions into the next life. And it's a pretty cursory life review. So it's not a detailed life review in which they go through all the incidents in their life. But this is a life review that helps them to understand why that things happened to them, what was going on in their life, and why was that person in their life, and what was that incident, and why did it happen as it did. So they'll go through a life review in which they'll understand things about their life.
And then the third life review is the one that is the heavy one. That's the one that they're going to have over an extended period of time. They're going to go through all the major incidents in their life, and they're going to experience all of the feelings, all of the emotions that all the people involved were feeling. It's not like they just feel them, they are actually going to become that person. So that if I've had an interaction with somebody in which I hurt her feelings, and it's a woman named Judy, and I hurt her feelings, I will go into that next life review, and I will become Judy. I will have all of her baggage, all her feelings, all her fears, and I will experience all the emotions that I, as Craig, had caused her to feel in her life as a result of what had happened. So then we will go through every incident in like that, and we will experience the things that people involved in it were feeling, and how what we did, both the good and the bad, how they affected those people. That's intended to teach. It is not a punishment. There is no punishment in the next life. So it's intended to help us to grow. We're continuing to grow. And with that new understanding, with that new knowledge, then we will grow into our lives in the next life. And we'll be able to come back and help other people with our increased insight, with our knowledge, with our wisdom that we've acquired. We can come back and help people, especially our loved ones on this side of life, realized what we know to be true now because we went through this. We've changed who we are as a person because we've experienced this. And so that is the life review, that is the profound life review, and really changes people for the better. Mhm. Oh, you
So
asked
having
about
it,
heaven and hell.
yeah, especially I've heard some NDEs where people have gone to a really dark void. They've even like smelled the sulfur and heard the screams, like the Bible described.
Yeah.
I know it's all a mental, it's of your own making. Anything that carries over, you're gonna preconceive it to be. But I'm
Mm.
curious what stories you might have around that.
Yeah, there are about 5% of the near-death experiences are negative near-death experiences, and I want to call them negative rather than hellish because they're of all different types. In the near-death experience, what happens is the person is still alive. The person is only near death. And so then these traumatic things are happening to the body. The body's being pushed and prodded and jostled and punctured, and it is really a terrible time for the body. It's a traumatic event for the body. And so what happens in these negative near-death experiences is that people describe being pushed and pulled, and they may then ascribe it later when they recall it. They may say, "Oh, there were demons who were pushing and pulling me," but they put the demons in there. That is not they're experiencing being pushed and pulled, but there's no demons there. But they insert that because it seems to them like that must be what have happened. And so these experiences then that happen that are negative near-death experiences are of a great variety of kinds. There are different kinds of people feeling like they're being pushed and pulled. They feeling like they've seen things. They've seen people who are being tortured or whatever the visions are. They don't. They have no consistency to them, which is one indication that they're very personal. They're not something which happens to everybody. And they are exactly what the person would expect, and they are in a very small number. That's only 5%. So you would expect that when the body is being traumatized, that people are going to be in a bad dream, and that's what we know to be true. The reason we know that's true is that the other 95% of the near-death experiences are all positive, and they are consistent. So you have the same things going on. You have the people going through the tunnel of light, the tunnel into the light, and you have the divine presence that comes to them. You have loved ones who come to them. All these things are consistent across near-death experiences. So we know that they are true, that they are what happens. And they don't have hellish experiences. Then when people come back from the afterlife, when they communicate to us about what's going on there, every one of them, 100%, without any doubt, says, no, there is no such place as a hell. There is no punishment. There is no judgment. People are not judged and punished. We'll go through the life review in which we will judge ourselves. We punish ourselves by having these feelings like regret
and feelings of sadness. And so we then are going to be going through the experience ourselves. We're not judged, or there is no punishment in anything that happens outside of us. So then, as far as the near-death experience and the traumatic experiences that go along with it, that's one variety. The second is that people can be taught things, they can learn things through the near-death experience. So some people may go through a negative experience. That may be part of their near-death experience. And as a result of that, then they're going to change their lives. I think there's a fellow named Storm who's famous for his hellish near-death experience. And it changed his life. He actually became a minister. So that had the effect of changing who he was as a person. That was the purpose of the negative experiences that he had. They were unique to him. Other people didn't have them. So there is no hell. There never was a hell. Hell was something which grew up in the church in the first century, and then was augmented in the second centuries, and then in poets such as Dante and Milton, over time. But prior to that, at the beginning of the first century, like there is no mention of a hell in the Acts of the Apostles, no mention of a hell in Paul's epistles or the other epistles that were not written by Paul but are in the canon. There's no mention in Mark, which is the earliest gospel. There was no hell. It was developed in the first century.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for going over that. It's important for people to hear.
Sure.
Well, let's get into a few ways people can connect with their loved ones in spirit.
Yeah, we have a lot of ways now. We're finding more and more every day. And they, from the other side, are adding things as we learn more. With the advent of electronic devices, for instance, we're now able to capture the voices of people on electronic devices. People from the afterlife come through and speak. What they're doing is they're laying down the electromagnetic tracks on the device, and that plays back as voice. We commonly do that now. People can commonly get the voices of their loved ones living in the life after this life. So they're evolving, they're being developed. There is now ChatGPT, and there are some who are saying that they are able to communicate with loved ones in the life after this life through ChatGPT. And we don't know where that's going to go, whether it really is them or not, but they're all new methods. So aside from those, we have the old methods that have been here for centuries, but especially after the 1850s. We have psychotherapists who can put people into a state of mind in which they have afterlife communications. We teach people on afterlifeinstitute.org. We have teaching which teaches people how to put themselves into a state of mind in which they go into self-hypnosis and they can have their own afterlife communications. We have mediums who are very talented in what they do. We have trance mediums who are able to allow people from the afterlife to take over their bodies and speak through them and do things through them. Materialization mediums, where you can sit in a seance with them and the people from the afterlife will materialize and walk out into the room and communicate. I've sat in a seance in which I had a person from the afterlife come in and put his hand over top of my head to show how big his hand was. And I could feel his hand. I could feel the bones. I could feel the knuckles on my head. And then someone else in the same seance came over, and his hand was smaller because he was a smaller person. And he put his hand on my head, and the same thing, except his hand was smaller. So they come through in these materialization seances and communicate with us. We have people who are able to use meditation and they go into a meditation state. People are using pendulums to be able to communicate with their loved ones in their life after this life. So there are a great variety. There are at least 15 methods people are using today to communicate with their loved ones. All you have to do is settle in and learn how to do it. Just relax and allow your mind to be open. And anybody can learn how to do it. It's just a matter of going into the practice, whatever it is, and learning how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about intention and the
Yeah.
power of the mind. I know you've written some powerful books that go really deep. Can you tell us a little bit about your work, your books, and where you might have somebody start?
Yeah, I would say that the place to start is with evidence beyond a reasonable doubt you will never die. And the reason I suggest that is because it has the evidence that we have from a variety of sources, all 15 of these methods that I've described. It has examples from every one of them that people can get on, and they can listen to the actual recordings of people from the afterlife speaking. And they can read about the experiences people have had whom we know. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who had the experience of a woman who had been a patient of hers who had passed away. And 2 years later, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was walking down the hallway of the University of Chicago where she was teaching, and this woman started walking beside her, and she recognized her immediately. It was this woman, Mrs. Schwartz, who had passed away 2 years before, and Mrs. Schwartz had a message for her. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross had this wonderful experience of this woman materializing, sitting down and talking with her for an extended period, because of the fact that people are living in the afterlife, and occasionally they can come into our lives and have an effect upon them. C.S. Lewis was J.B. Phillips had an experience in which C.S. Lewis came through from the afterlife, and so we have many of these kinds of experiences. All of these experiences are further proof that we just live on after the body dies. We have a tremendous amount of communication now, libraries full of it.
Mhm. I think most people stuck in the day to day forget all of this very quickly, that we're not this body, this job, this label, that. Do you have any tips for how people can remember all that?
Yeah, you just have to open your mind. What Jesus, Yeshua, said, open your hearts and minds. That's what he said. Open your heart
Mhm.
and mind. That's all you have to do. And then you will come into knowledge. The knowledge will come to you if you're open to it. And that means that if you see an article and it's something about a person's near-death experience, and you're open to looking at it and reading it and experiencing that, and you may go to one of my books or Anthony Borgia's book and read it, just to read it with an open mind and see what you find there. And as you do that, as you have these experiences with an open mind, you gradually will come to understand the fact that we continue to live after the body dies. You will become
Mhm.
100% sure that that will happen, that your loved ones are alive and well in the afterlife, and that you will continue in this life until you join them at the end. There is no end of life. You do not die. The body dies, but you do not die. And so if you just open your mind and watch the videos and read the books, and you will gradually come to it. And after a while, you will come to have no fear of death, to look forward to the time when you will have your wonderful reunion with all the people and the pets that you love. You just have to
Mhm.
open your mind to it.
Absolutely. I have a few more questions just as we wrap this up, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Um, if you could erase one illusion humanity keeps falling for, what would it be?
That's the illusion that we die when the body dies.
Mhm.
So that is a terrible illusion. It was not current when the church held sway up until the 16th century. So the church taught that we continue to live after the body dies, but they had a kind of a strange view of it. They didn't really fully understand what that meant and what the afterlife is like. You can imagine people strumming hearts and worshiping God all day long, and that is not what happens. So they had this strange view, but they did believe that people would continue to live after the body dies. Science came in, and as science made discoveries, then it pushed out religion and said, "This is nonsense. This is superstition. It's childish. Give up on it." And so then people started giving up on religion, and so that there went all their beliefs about the afterlife and about what happens when the body dies, and so all that was thrown out the window when science came in. People still held the native knowledge. We have a native innate knowledge that grandma is alive and that she is looking down on us. We all had that feeling about the loved ones who have gone before. So that feeling is still there. That couldn't be extinguished. But science tried to extinguish it, tried to extinguish everything about the psyche and about the mind and about the life after this life. So today, now we are now coming to the realization through science as well as through metaphysics that we continue to live after the body dies, that the mind is not confined to the body. The mind just uses bodies, has body experiences, but is not in the body. And so the mind continues after the body dies. We just continue blissfully and going to the next realm of life. So the greatest problem that people have now is still materialism. It's still science holds sway. Science is vastly advanced in AI and discoveries about the subatomic particles and about the far reaches of the universe. It's vastly superior, knowledgeable now, but at the same time is in caves as far as understanding spiritualism and the life after this life and who we are as human beings. We still are full of superstitions and there's nonsense that people believe. And so you gradually have to grow out of the nonsense, out of the superstitions, out of these ridiculous beliefs about what happens when the body dies. And people are coming to that now. It's going to take another century. When Copernicus first said that the Earth was not the center of the universe, that there is a solar system and the sun is the center. And it took nearly 100 years later before Galileo said the same thing, and people still didn't believe it. And then it took decades after Galileo said it again that people finally realized that the Earth is not the center of the universe. That's what it's going to take. People are going to realize over decades and perhaps centuries that we are immortal beings having a physical experience, and that we will continue after this body dies, and we will have reunions with our loved ones, all the people and all the pets that we love. It's a matter of fact, and everybody will come to realize it in time.
If love is the core frequency of the universe, why are
Mhm.
we so disconnected, divided, and in fear?
Yeah, and that is out of superstition. As to why the universe was created in this way, we are in Earth School. And so during our time in Earth School, we're in the crucible. We're having experiences. And these experiences then are experiences which at time are tragic. They're painful that we have to go through these experiences. But the purpose of the experiences is for us to shed what we've been taught about life and about the life after this life. And when we shed that, then what breaks through is the love that is at the core of our existence. Love is our natural state. The belief that we should be separate, that we should grab all we can for ourselves and not consider other people, all of that is superstition. And that eventually is going to go away. Yeshua said that. Jesus said that. And he said that there are two great commandments. Love your neighbor as yourself and love God. And these two great commandments that was the whole thing. That monstrous church was built around it. But that's the simple truth. And so then eventually people are coming to realize that. We're coming to realize that we are going to be full of, in a heaven full of love and compassion for each other that we can begin on earth. We can have here as well as then having it in the life after this life. All we have to do is grow up, just learn that that's true. And we're in the process of doing that now. It'll take a few decades or a few centuries before that happens, but it will happen.
I agree 100%, and that was a beautiful way to put it. Well, Dr. Hogan, is there anything you'd like to add? Any of your latest work you've got coming up?
Yeah, the most important thing to add is that people can lose entirely their fear of the end of this life when they make the transition to the next, and they can understand what their life is going to be like in the next life and what their their loved ones are doing there, and they can communicate with their loved ones living in the next life. And all these things are true. People will just begin to realize them and go to the next step, which means to grow into them. And that means learning about them and understanding them and trying things out and being open and willing. And if they'll do that, they'll find that their lives are going to change. They will become different people. They'll become changed people. And all they have to do is allow it to happen. It will happen naturally if they just open themselves to it.
Mhm. Well, thank you for the work you're doing, standing in truth and helping bridge science, spirit, and human meaning. Thanks to everyone listening. This is the stuff they don't teach in school, but maybe they should. And Dr. Hogan, I hope you have a wonderful day and thank you again.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
All right, everyone. Humanfluence out.